come over the lunar horizon. I think that all three of us agree that was it.
That's the one.
These guys took a lot longer to say that, but that was it, seeing the picture coming up.
Wait a minute, that's their gig. You know, that's what they're
We've
doing.
got nothing else to say.
Did you have something else? No, thank you.
Are you the big brother or the little brother?
Are you the big brother or the little brother? Little brother. He didn't want to hear that question.
I'm not related to them. So. Hi, my name is Dror Yervlivker. I'm studying public policy right now at Georgetown, and I was a school teacher before that. And I'm curious to know, kind of on a broader scale, who were the people that inspired you to do what you did? And as a second part to that, what kind of inspiration or leadership do you think you can give or you would like to give to young people like the two questioners we just had?
Let's start with you, Jim.
Well, I kind of think that the inspiration, and I hope that the space program does this, is to give the young people a sense of accomplishment and that they would like to follow the footsteps, not so much being astronauts, but being in science or technology or making a successful career. I'm associated with the Adler Planetarium, and our whole project there is to have young people come through, and through seeing the various artifacts that they have and the programs that we have, gives them a sense of that they want to accomplish something in their life. And so that's what I hope we get out of our space activities.
How about your inspiration? I think that was one of his questions.
My inspiration actually started just beginning in high school. I, for some reason, had started to I was a Boy Scout, so I was interested in astronomy. And then I started to learn about rockets through a pioneer, American pioneer named Robert Goddard. Read his books, wanted to become a rocket engineer, and towards the end of World War II, tells you how old I am, but anyway, we learned about von Braun and the V-2 rocket. Wanted to become a rocket engineer, wrote to the American Rocket Society, and they said that best to take all sorts of science courses and either go to MIT or Caltech. I couldn't do either. But then I finally got into naval aviation. My uncle was a very early naval aviator, and he gave me the second inspiration, sort of a second goal. And I wrote my term paper on rockets at the Naval Academy. And then, as things happen, and this is something I like to tell all young people, that you keep trying again, because my interest in rockets and aviation met when I went and graduated from test pilot school, and suddenly NASA needed astronauts. And it was a natural. I just had to be in the right place at the right time with the right credentials. I didn't make it the first time, which is another thing that young people ought to think about. I was one of the first 32 of the original 7, but the other 7 guys got in, and then I applied for the second time around, and I made it. So you've got to keep trying. If you fail the first time, keep at it, and you'll always succeed.
Bill, did you have an inspiration, a specific one?
Well, like Jim, my high school science teachers, biology teachers got me turned on to science and engineering, which I later followed even in the Air Force. But I think I have to give it to my dad, who was an American naval officer whose ship was sunk out in China. First officer to order open fire on the Japanese in 1937. And so defending the country, being in the military was just, I never questioned that I wouldn't go to one of the academies. And I was lucky to do that, become a fighter pilot. And then NASA had this curious combination of needing people with technical backgrounds and fighter experience. And like Jim, I was in the right place at the right time and got into the third group.
I'm absolutely shocked that Buck Rogers wasn't your inspiration. Did you, I think the other part of the question that we heard there a moment ago, if maybe you'd restate it, that is, how do you feel, what can you do to inspire others?
Well, our family has a little foundation, and one of the main things we support are environmental and science education. And I think that it's important to be well-rounded and know your Greek and Latin and English, but you better know your geometry and your algebra and your physics if you want to be an astronaut, but just if you want to be a functional citizen in this increasingly technological age. So I would encourage young folks and old folks to to break out those kind of books and learn them.
Frank.
Well, for some reason, almost like a disease, I started building model airplanes when I was quite young, and even though we were very, very poor, my parents encouraged me, and if I could pay for it, I took flying lessons when I was young. And as Bill and Jim said, we were right behind the greatest generation, the one that and there was. I was sort of like I was born with an innate sense of patriotism. I think partly that was because of the war.
Yeah.
You know, the other part of your question I think is really a good one. I can't remember anybody coming around and saying, what do you want to be? Maybe you ought to be this. It's almost as if we are now trying to, what should I say, coach people into doing something. I think people somehow have to find it within them, and then you can develop it. But trying to preach to kids, they'll go do this or go do. I'm not sure it works, and we may be doing too much of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, the word you used, Bill, programming. You think there's too much programming of?
I don't know. I'm not in education.
I'm not either. I'm just telling what
but
I
I think at least to have quality education available, not just in the elite private schools, but in the public schools.
Exactly.
Good science program. Maybe not everybody takes it. At least everybody has a chance to take it. Mm-hmm. Good math. To get a technologically literate voting mass in the country.
You're a school teacher.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I couldn't agree
on
more.
Target?
I couldn't agree more. No, I think that that really the young people of today could use more role models like yourselves. In all honesty,
and the teachers could use merit pay, in my view. And I'm serious.
Hey, I would love that. I would love that. But all I would say in response is simply thank you very much for your views and for your service. I really
along that line, I think one of the greatest privileges I've had is going to a wonderful public high school in Tucson, Arizona, a small little town. But teachers were so dedicated, and that just Bill said the opportunities were there. And
isn't it sad that the president-elect is thrashing around trying to decide whether his girls ought to go to a public or a private school? Isn't it too bad that the nation's capital doesn't have a decent public school system? And it doesn't.
Thank you.
Another question.
Good afternoon. My name is A.R. Hogan. I'm a science journalist, and I'm working on a doctoral dissertation at the University of Maryland about the history of television and radio space coverage. And I wanted to ask you about the impact of television news coverage in building public awareness, knowledge, and support for the space program. And as the Apollo program got more and more interesting, the Apollo 8 flight being a pivotal point, yet after Apollo 11 the coverage declined as the scientific exploration got more and more complex and challenging. I'm wondering what you think about if the coverage had continued, if the news media had really tried to build the public support more than it did, would the public support have been sustained?
Frank?
I'm not certain you can do that. I think that when you set a goal, which was to get to the moon first, and then you achieve that goal, American people are wonderful. They say, ho hum, what's next? And I don't think that any amount of media coverage could have changed it.
Now, I agree with Frank. On Apollo 11, of course, everything was Apollo 8, Apollo 11, big coverage. On Apollo 13, in the beginning, before the takeoff, I think the only mention about Apollo 13 was on page 78 of the weather page at the New York Times.
You fixed that when you blew up the oxygen tank.
Well, that's the point, Frank, that I want to make. Everything was so complacent until the explosion occurred. And if you remember what my wife said when they called up and said, can we put a TV camera on your lawn after the explosion, she said, well, you weren't interested before the explosion. Why should you be interested now?
Good for her. I didn't remember that quote. That's great.
Well, NASA had gotten bad mouthed and even still does about not doing more to bring it to the public. I mean, I thought they did a great job in trying. I thought the press did a great job in rising to the occasion as they could, but it's really the viewership that really doesn't give much of a darn, about the 15th Apollo landing, or what's happened in Baghdad lately.
Mm-hmm.
We
Are we still there?